Our next item this evening is an informal presentation by Ironwood Development Corporation for Parcel D. Parcel D is the sole piece of property in the back end of Arbor Crest that's not developed. It's the old site for Unisys. Many might remember that. It's just important to note for everybody tuning in this evening that this is just an informal meeting. There's been no formal application that's been submitted or anything. It's just an opportunity for those representatives from Ironwood Development to present to our community at large. Mr. Connor and myself previously both served together on land development, so we've met with them and heard this presentation, but it'll be new to the residents, some of our staff members, and also some of our colleagues on the board, along with the Planning Commission too. So with no further ado, I will turn this over to the representatives from Ironwood so we can hear their presentation tonight. Thank you.
Kristen, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Do I get video, or how do we turn that on?
Yeah, you should be promoted to panelist. It should actually alert you. Get an unmute, Kristen.
It so happens the snow removal guys with the heavy equipment are here now, right outside my office. So I've been waiting all day and they're here now. Hopefully it's not noisy. I do have John Kennedy, Jeremy Fogel, and Eric Knopling with me. Good evening. Thanks for sharing your time with us. I know that this is extraordinary, and we're glad to be here to share some ideas with you. So as the chair has indicated, this is what we used to all call the Unisys site in the back corner. My firm has been dealing with this property for decades. I personally went to the township building and climbed through boxes and boxes of files, looking at things for not only parcel D, but what's happened on A, B, and C. But I saw plans for offices, flex space, laboratories with warehouses, research facilities, and otherwise, buildings of all different configurations, 3 to 4 stories in height, tens of thousands of square feet to hundreds of thousands of square feet, and all of them industrial in style. So then along came Jeremy and Eric with Ironwood, and they've informed me that they have this property under agreement, and there's still pressure for those kinds of uses. This is the last piece of, this available land. It's 27 acres in size, but they've come up with something that they think is better. A residential use of the property, something that would be less impactful for our neighbors that are all residential on 2 sides. So we are mindful of our neighbors. We are mindful of the township's concerns about school-age children and taxing the school district. So we began having conversations, and we started with something much more dense. And through our conversations with staff and with the stakeholders who live nearby, we have come up with probably our 5th plan that we think finally nails it. So that's our goal tonight, is to convince you that this is a great idea. We're glad to be here in a public setting because we do want to hear what you think, what the neighbors think. I'm not going to take up any more time. So Jeremy or Eric, I think Jeremy is nodding his head. He's going to a few comments, and then we'll get right to the proposed plan with John Kennedy, who will walk you through. He's a land planner, and John is the consultant on this job who's laid out all the different versions. So Jeremy.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate the opportunity to be before you tonight. It's nice to be in Whitpain Township. We are a development firm that's local. We're based in Conshohocken. Eric, my partner, and I have been doing ground up and renovation of commercial real estate for 20 plus years. We started Ironwood Property Group in 2003 and have been working in our region predominantly. We have a relationship with the current owner of the property, and we have an agreement of sale, as Kristen said. So we're approaching you with an equitable ownership to see if we could talk to you about the redevelopment of the property. So while the site has remained vacant for many years, it, as Kristen said, has been, I'm sure, under constant pressure. You just don't find 27-acre parcels in a situation like this very often. And the industrial segment, the warehouse segment of the real estate industry is probably the only segment that has been doing very well over the last bunch of years, and it continues to do so, as we all read in the paper. It seems like Amazon's taking a warehouse every other week somewhere, and so again, it's a highly sought after piece of property. But when Eric and I started to look at the property and we started to understand not just the Arborcrest community, but the community around it a little better, we definitely saw that we are very proximate to neighbors, and that it would seem to us that high intense use that's permitted in the RE district might not be the best idea here. And so we wanted to explore other options. We recognize that one side is an industrial warehouse type use on the one side, and on the other is residential. And so we thought a transitional use might be something to look at. So let's see, we, I guess, have come up with a number of different residential plans, but really what we thought we would start with was a dive into the land planning aspect of it. So we engaged John Kennedy from John Kennedy Associates, and John will come up next. And I really think, rather than hear so much from us, we want you to hear why we have kind of gone down the path, and why we think that where we're coming to at the end is appropriate from our perspective. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. As stated, I'm John Kennedy with Kennedy Associates, planners and land use consultants.
John, a little louder, John.
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe Roman, if we could put up the slides that we had sent into the township. This first image here is a image of the site itself. As Kristen said, it's a little bit under 27 acres. It is at the back of the Arborcrest office park. It has, it's kind of an L-shaped parcel. It does have a leg which goes down to Penland Bluebell Pike. That's actually a fair size piece of land. That leg alone is about 5 acres or so. And when we look around the property, we have a variety of different land uses. To the north and west, our immediate neighbors are some healthcare companies. Just beyond that, we have Siemens. A little closer to the turnpike, the building that looks like the number 6 there is the new Corman building, which is multifamily, the Corman Suites. Down below that, we have the smaller building is Unisys. And then in the larger, what used to be main buildings, are several healthcare companies and some office uses too. In terms of zoning, this property is zoned RE, which is research and engineering. It allows a large variety of different uses, and it is surrounded by several non-residential uses. The healthcare provider right next to us, that is zoned also RE, but then as we go further west, we have what's called AR, which is administration and research. And then immediately below us, Unisys and the larger buildings, that is all zoned industrial. And again, that allows for a large variety of uses. Then to the east and to the north, on 2 sides, we have R1 residential. And it's kind of a mixture. Some of these neighborhoods are fairly old. They have the older R1 standards. Some of them are a little bit newer. But in any case, what we have here is a situation where we have the least intensive district in the township, which would be R1, immediately adjacent to some of the most intensive districts from a zoning standpoint. These have much higher impervious coverage ratios. They have higher building coverage, higher height. You're allowed to go 50 feet in all of these districts, as opposed to a standard, say, 2-story house, which we find in the R1 districts. So from a planning standpoint, after talking to Jeremy and Eric, this really is an ideal location for a transitional residential use. So what we started with was looking at a multifamily use basically multifamily apartments, very similar to the Corman project. We're talking about a 4 to 5 story building with parking underneath it. This is something that I think we're seeing in many communities around the Delaware Valley. DVRPC recently put out a publication talking about the very high demand for rental housing. And so we thought that this would be an ideal location for it. You have opportunities to be able to walk to work here very close by. There's a lot of retail that the township has recently invested in at 202 and 73. So you have a lot of the elements that would make for a good high density residential community. So we have put together a plan and we met with staff and met with the Land Development Committee, and we did receive some comments. I think generally the comments were in the vein of we would like to see something that would be less dense and also something that would be a little bit lower in height, something that might blend in a little bit better with the residential neighbors to the east and to the north. So after a number of plans, what we came up with was, if we go to the next plan, Roman, was a proposal for a townhouse development. And what this is this is actually in accordance with your R3 zoning. This was sort of suggested as something that would be a more appropriate density. This density is at 5 units per acre. To give you an idea, the Corman community that was approved, that we saw on the last slide, that is at about 24, 25 units per acre, I believe. And that's an option that is allowed under the RE zoning. So what this plan would contemplate would be a rezoning to R3. This is in accordance with the R3 standards. It does have one modification, however, and that would be the neighbors that are adjacent to us on the Deaver Road side, which is kind of the inside of the L. That setback has been increased to a total of 150 feet. The R3 actually only requires a building setback of 100 feet when you're against a residential district. Against other districts, the setback would be 50 feet. So as we can see here, what we have are the buildings are set back 150 feet from the property line in that vicinity. This is a total of 133 units, which is the density that would be allowed under the R3 zoning. This meets all the other standards for the R3 in terms of building separation, building coverage, green space, and et cetera. We are utilizing the entry road off of Penland Bluebell Pike, but other than that entry road, there is no real development that would occur there. That would be maintained in open space, perhaps would have some trail connections as well. We also have another access point, which is kind of on the top of the plan, and that is a driveway access that the property has that gets you out to Jolly Road. So we would have the ability to have access in 2 different ways. Plus, we also do have an emergency access on the bottom of the property. Now, another alternative that we looked at, because even though this does have 150-foot setback, in order to make that work, one of the things that we did was, if you notice the buildings that are against the Deaver Road neighbors, they actually, the fronts of those units actually face the backs of those houses, and the roadway and the driveways are located in the building setback, which is permitted. There, of course, would be a minimum buffer that is required, but right now with what you see here, there's approximately 95 feet in between the edge of the cartway and the property line. So if we could go to the next slide, This was something that I sort of made a recommendation to Jeremy and Eric that they may want to take a look at this. This is conforming to all R3 standards. And so this does have the 100-foot setback. But if you notice the buildings against the Beaver Road neighbors, they actually back up to it. So you have backyards facing backyards, something that would be a little bit more conventional in terms of the building placements. It actually ends up picking up 5 more feet. There's a total of 100 feet in between the backs of the units and the property line. So from a planning standpoint, I think that this is something that would be a little bit more appropriate in this location. You've got a residential use next to a residential use, but it's also buffering a higher intensity sort of industrial research type uses on both sides. It also would not have a large impact on the school district. One of the reasons why we actually favored the multifamily apartments in the beginning is apartments have almost no impact whatsoever on school age in terms of providing school age children. It's extremely low in school age children population. So probably the next best thing would be townhomes, which according to the latest Montgomery County numbers, they generate 0.19 kids per household or per unit. And so a community such as this would generate a total of about 25 school age kids. You typically would take away maybe 15% for private schools and parochial schools and such. So you might end up with 21 public school kids out of a community of this size and configuration. In terms of the buildings themselves, these are 24-foot wide townhomes. They're 54 deep. So we anticipate that these would really be people who are kind of just getting going in the housing market in their life. And so this might be the place where they would start a family, but once they start a family, they would then most likely move on to a single family home, and most likely many of these homes that are already in the area and want to stay in the township. We think that this is an ideal type of housing for the area, for the township. As I know all of you are aware, this is a very popular township in terms of residential growth. And so this is a type of housing that we feel would be very desirable, in demand. We see a lot of people going after kind of the luxury, real high-end market. And this is something that I think might be a little bit more reasonable for people to be able to afford. Maybe perhaps people who grew up in the township and would like to stay in the township, raise a family, and be able to be near their parents. So I think from a planning standpoint, this is something that could work out pretty well. From a zoning standpoint, one of the things that's kind of interesting in terms of looking at your zoning map, I did notice that there's several locations where R3 has been used as a buffer in and around industrial districts. So this is something that it's a pattern that is already established and has been used elsewhere in the township. So I think from a planning standpoint, this is much more appropriate to be able to sort of handle this transitional situation, which we have just by virtue of these two types of uses being located immediately next to each other. And I think that's pretty much everything that we have to say. We would welcome your comments. We're also more than happy to answer any questions that you might have in terms of the plan or the layouts or what is proposed here.
I have a few questions, if I may. It's
Sure.
Supervisor Kosh.
Mhm.
Just a couple. Did I miss how many floors are each of those units that you're proposing?
These would be 2-story townhomes.
Okay, and how many bedrooms?
Probably 3 or 4 at the most, but most likely 3.
Okay, where I didn't see parking, is that underneath the,
Well, each one of these would have a 2-car garage, and then there would be 2 cars in the driveway. So each unit has at least 2 cars, even if we don't count the garage. We have sort of sprinkled around some guest parking. We probably would perhaps add a little bit more guest parking, but right now we're not going into great detail on some of those items that would be handled in land development if we were able to get that far.
and just thinking about potential possibility of kids and therefore the impact on the school, about what is your estimated cost per unit? What would you be selling these for?
Oh boy, that is a little tough to say right now, and the only reason why is even if we were to get a zoning change, we would have to go through land development. We're literally talking a few years down the road, 2 to 3 years down the road. So it's a little bit hard to tell what the price point might be at that point in time.
But for right now, about if the project was done and complete and the units were what you envisioned, what would you expect that they would go for today?
And I can answer that. I mean, just because we're speculating,
Yeah.
Commissioner, I think the homes will be approximately 2,600 square feet. So we're going to obviously guess probably $250, $300 a foot is about what they would sell for. So somewhere in the range of $650,000 to about $800,000 per unit.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot of money for a starter home.
Yes.
Does anybody else on the board have any questions for the representatives?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Connor, I probably have a couple of questions and comments, but I'd reserve my questions and comments until after we hear from the Planning Commission, if they have any, and from the public.
Very good. Representative joining us from the Planning Commission. Can we hear any questions you guys might have or any thoughts?
Madam Chair, this is Roman.
Ms. Chair, Rick Shorn is on. I'm sorry, Roman.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that it might be worth for Mrs. Leininger to repeat the instructions on how to raise your hands in case anybody's interested in doing that.
No problem. I'll repeat that. Yes, if you're joining us through Zoom video, use the raise hand feature. You'll see the raise hand icon either at the bottom of your screen or the top if you're using a mobile device. If you don't see that icon, just move your computer mouse or tap on your mobile screen or on your screen and the hand icon should appear. And at this time, we do have several hands raised in the audience, a few of which are actually members of the Planning Commission. So if you'd like, we can go ahead and start.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, before we do
No
that,
problem. We're going to start with.
Forgive me, but before we get to our Planning Commission folks, I just had a very quick question for the presenters. Could someone tell me both the high end and the low end on the number of units we could expect under these various scenarios? What would be the fewest amount of units and what would be the most amount of units?
Well, both of these plans have the same number of units. It's 133, and that is the number of units, the maximum number of units that are permitted under the R3 zoning. The density is a mathematical equation, so that would be the most number. Now, in land development, it's possible that we may lose a few units. Obviously, as you start to engineer the project, as you start to come up with a stormwater solution, that may take up more land than we anticipated. So you could end up losing, you might end up losing 10, 15 units, something like that. But I think generally for townhomes, you're going to see somewhere in the range of 4.5 to 5 units per acre is pretty typical.
And if I could add, just for the benefit of the neighbors and the residents that are interested in this application, we are at the absolute infancy stage of an idea, you know, running it by you guys to see what you think and see if this idea and this plan and the zoning district makes sense for the property. If we were successful and move forward, then we start that land development process, which you are all familiar with, which requires, you know, 50-page sets of plans with fully engineered drawings that are reviewed by the township engineer, the county, all of your consultants, lighting, landscaping, stormwater management, ingress and egress, parking, all of those things. The details of how we move the earth comes after we figure out what it is that we're proposing. So I just want the residents to know that that's a public process too. The Planning Commission will be involved in that. There'll be many meetings in front of them, back to you folks. So if we were to get into the details, those specifics would come out. And I'm sure people are concerned about stormwater management and landscaping and things like that, traffic. Thank you.
Okay, we can go to the members of the audience then. First up is going to be Rick Shoren. Rick, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay,
We can.
hi, this is Rick Shoren. I'm Vice Chair of the Township's Planning Commission. I've been on the commission, I guess, 12 years now, and I've seen a number of these projects. I guess I'll start off with two questions or comments. One, and I guess I've seen this before, well, day one, when people move in, you might have whatever it was, 0.12 kids per house. That's day one. 10 years down the road, particularly on price housing, it's not going to be 0.12 kids per house that are going to be there. It's going to be significantly more. And obviously, as someone quickly acknowledged, these are not starter homes at $650,000. So these are people that, I mean, I guess there might be one or two that'll be their first home, but I don't think so. My bigger concern is the access. Currently, that driveway from Penland Pike to the back of this had been for many years a one-way access, and I think that was a negotiated deal. Perhaps Roman has a better understanding. Obviously, there were concerns that that was a one-way driveway, and forgetting that in fact it was one-way, it's I think, and I've been certainly at that intersection of Penland and Stenton, it is not the safest place to be exiting, entering. I don't think it's an ideal situation to have that many additional vehicles coming and going. And I guess you can even look at the accidents at that corner and what the township has attempted to do. And then the other side, the other sort of driveway, it really is a driveway that goes back around the old Merck building. It really is a driveway. I just can't imagine the amount of vehicles that you would end up having to use that and what you might have to do to improve it. I guess there had been some discussion when the Unisys property got converted, you would need to do some sort of traffic study. We've already, obviously not in 2020, but 19, the impact on Union Meeting going up to Skipack, you know, at rush hour has been very significant. So those are my two concerns. And it is a pretty big transition from the R1 of 30,000 square feet per home to the much higher density of the R3. So I'm not totally sure that's an appropriate transition. Those are my comments.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yes, next up, we're going to go to Aid Galloway. Aid, you can go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Hi, this is Aid Galloway. I'm a resident on Windrise. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you a little bit. Your sound, however, there's some feedback with it. Do you have a, are you using a mobile device?
No, I'm actually using my laptop. You know, I'll dial in.
Oh, wait, you just
Okay,
got
thank
better.
Or can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is Aid Galloway. I'm a resident on Windrise Drive. You know, I think, you know, as this is now, I believe, the fifth plan, I was curious to understand what is the timeline for this development, understanding that there's a lot involved. I mean, we 5 years away, 10 years away, just curious on the timeline.
if we were successful, we're at least 2 to 3 years.
Mhm.
I don't think it wouldn't be as long as 5, Mr. Galloway. It would be more around 3-ish. My client would say 1 year, but that's his optimism. I'm more of a realist. I'd say 2 to 3.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Susan Mudambi. Susan?
Thank you. I'm Susan Mudambi. I am a resident and a neighbor of the property. I agree with Mr. Shoren about the access. My property backs onto that access road. It is a very narrow road. It was one way. That intersection with Penland, I think that would be a kind of a dangerous access. If you're assuming that 133 townhouses, people are going to use that as their primary egress and entrance and exit, that seems to be a lot of traffic on that road. So I would be concerned about that. You're talking about a range of 650,000 to 800,000. That's higher value than most of the R1 properties that this is adjacent to. It seems out of whack. Now, the only reason I mention that is that we've been down this road before with people proposing something, it gets approved, and then they switch to something else. For example, with the Corman Suites, that was supposed to be corporate short-term stay, and now it's apartments. We've seen this before. It just doesn't seem logical that you'd have $800,000 up to $800,000 for a townhome, and you're calling that a starter home with no children. So, which gets me to my question. You talk a lot about intensity and density. You're positioning this as a less intense use of the property. And I would like to know what you really mean by intensity. A warehouse or an office building, or the kinds of things that are currently being used in that Unisys property, there's very little traffic. There are very few people in and out. Warehouses are mostly automated. There are different kinds of traffic for a warehouse, and I know you're using that as the boogeyman here, but the other uses of the property I would not describe as highly intensive use. So what do you mean by intensity, and what do you mean by density?
John,
I'll answer that.
Hang on, John. I want to say that I think Jeremy shot high with that 800 number, and I don't think I don't think that's really the right range for this. But the problem is that we don't know what the costs are going to be to get through the development, so it's really a shot in the dark. Obviously, the higher the price, the better the development can be. We can add amenities and finishes that allow a super high-end product, but it's really premature, and I don't want anybody to grab onto that 800 number. John will talk about the intensity, but we were talking about the impacts of buildings and parking lots and not just traffic. John?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me comment on the roads and the access, because a couple people brought that up. We are not implying that these roadways and driveways will be used as is. They would have to be improved. In some cases, they might have to be improved quite a bit so that they would be brought up to the township's road standards. However, they are the legal access that this parcel has for vehicles. In terms of intensity and density, the reason why I use those two terms, and I think what's probably more appropriate is intensity, is that obviously when you have residential uses that you're talking about, you typically talk about them in terms of density of dwelling units per acre. However, when you are comparing it to non-residential uses, you can't use that same metric. So what you compare it to would be intensity. And intensity has many different meanings, but from a planning standpoint, the uses that are adjacent in terms of the the research and engineering and office and healthcare, those are more intensive from a planning standpoint than any residential use, perhaps other than a 4-story apartment building. If you look at the amount of impervious coverage on those properties, it's higher, it's much higher, which has impacts in terms of stormwater. If you look at the building coverage, it's also much higher. If you look at things like energy use, if you look at traffic during peak times, it is much higher than traffic from a residential development such as we are proposing. So that's why you really have to look at a wide range of different standards and metrics when you compare these two types of land uses right next to each other. The one thing I will say that is a little bit unusual is to have, as I said in the beginning, a township's least intensive zoning district immediately next to the most intensive zoning district. That is a little bit unusual. Typically, we do find some types of transitional zoning in between the two.
And also the style of building is different. We're talking about a residential structure, which is 2 stories with a hip roof versus an industrial looking building that could be 50 feet in height.
Right,
With mechanicals on the roof, so I think that also lends to the intensity as well.
Susan, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make one other comment. This is really not a question for Ironwood, but it's more as a comment to the Board of Supervisors to consider. That this property is also adjacent to, and they didn't mention this in the presentation, to the Bluebell Camp, which is more than 50 acres, zoned residential out of use for the, so we don't, that future of that property is also unknown. And obviously this is nothing, Ironwood has nothing to do with the future use of that other parcel. But overall, in thinking about the intensity of development in that part of the township with no 133 homes with no park, or they're basically going to be developing what is a soccer field, a wooded path through woods and baseball fields, and putting townhomes there with no place for future, as Rick Shoren said, future kids to play in. And then across the street, we've got the Bluebell Camp, which could be developed, also residential, perhaps high intensity residential. This is going to change. This could potentially change the whole feel of that part of the township. So that was just a comment I wanted to register, because that it is, we missed the problem of development of around the corner of Mermaid, but now you're just going to talk about intense development of this property and potentially Bluebell Camp. So it's just shifting development to another area of the township.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to go to Richard Burns. Richard, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, my name's Richard Burns. We live on Maple Hill Drive. You keep talking about easement for Deaver and that area. Maple Hill Drive and Cedar Drive also back up to this. And where we live, that road is about 5 feet from our property line, the access road from Pendleton Bluebell Pike. What can you do about that? We keep having illegal aliens hopping the fence and robbing us. We need to have that stopped. What are you going to do about security too? And also, why can't we go with what is around 2/3 of that property is single family homes that are on more than an acre? Why can't we develop that as single family homes on more than an acre?
Madam Chair, can I just clarify? Is Mr. Burns suggesting that there's someone coming from a different country jumping fences? I don't understand the reference to illegal aliens. What is the purpose of that?
The people that a lot of landscapers have people that are not American citizens, and they're coming through from Deaver, crossing your road or being left off on your access road. They've cut through the fence multiple times. Residents have tried to fix the fence. They pulled their pickup truck up to the fence where we live, and they hop over the fence, that 8-foot fence, because we're only about 5-10 feet from that access road. What are you going to do about some sort of security there?
I'll say this about that. I wasn't aware that that was going on, Mr. Burns, and we are the equitable owner, so we can certainly talk to the owner. So as I said in the beginning, this is the infancy stage of things. This is just the planning and what kind of use could be there. And then once we get to the how, this property would be cleaned up. It would be, developed, energized, and used such that maybe those issues would go away. But I'm hopeful that if we get to the land development process, that you would stay part of the conversation and we can work on those issues and how that access road would function.
Okay. And also, we have no lights back here. They used to have lights back there, and that was a deterrent for these people. Okay.
We'll talk to the owner. I'll make a note of that.
Okay, but what about having it as single-family homes, 1-acre single-family homes, which go 2/3 of the way around that property already? 1-acre single-family homes that surround the property now, because when that camp goes up for sale, we don't want to have a whole bunch of apartments back there too, or condos. But 1-acre single-family homes, you could get 20 of them, make $20 million off of it.
I'll let Mr. Kennedy, who is our planner, answer the question about the single-family homes.
Well, I think there's a couple of issues here. Number one is going to be the cost of the ground. Obviously this is highly sought after non-residential land, which, as Jeremy mentioned, this type of use, the industrial type uses are extremely popular right now. And so in that sense, the cost most likely does not allow that. And now I'm saying that not knowing what the cost of the property is, but just typically in my experience. I think also it putting R1 there kind of defeats the purpose of just good planning sense, and that is trying to, when you have uses that are very different, you typically try to transition and buffer in between them. And so you could have something else, but it would not make sense from a planning standpoint to build 30,000 square foot single family lots. They could be very, very small singles, something like that might work, but or twins or townhomes, but something more in that range would really be more appropriate from a planning standpoint.
We back up to that property. We've been here for years. Okay, we don't have any transition. Don't have any problem with having regular homes in there, the size of ours, and with the 1-acre lot. Reduce the number of kids going to school. Reduce the amount of cars coming in and out. Reduce most of the problems that you'll come in with 133 units, approximately 600 to 700 new people, and 300 to 400 new cars coming up and down that road. With your,
I was going to say, actually, single family detached homes, like you're suggesting, they generate far more school-age children, quite a bit more school-age children.
20 homes wouldn't create that many, as opposed to
I think you would probably get more than 20 homes, but regardless, you're certainly per unit, you're going to generate far more school-age children.
Right, per unit. We'll have a lot less units. 20 versus 150.
You might end up with the same number of kids easily.
That's okay.
Any other questions or comments, Mr. Burns?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Kathleen John. Kathleen, you can go ahead and
Really,
Mute your mic.
really quickly, can I just address a statement that was made by the last neighbor? Certainly, I think we can appreciate and do appreciate Mr. Burns's comments and suggestions and questions regarding the property and concern for security in his property. That being said, I am uncomfortable with the labeling of people in our community as illegal aliens or aliens in general. We do not know the resident status, the citizenship status, the visas or work visa status of any person who is working in that area or environment, and I'm just uncomfortable leaving it as that. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, Kathleen John was the next.
Yeah, Kathleen's here. She's my wife. And my name is Reese John. And we live on Deaver Drive, right next, we border the property.
Right in the middle.
And I guess I would like to make a couple comments. And I understand that, you know, this has got a ways to go yet, but the 130 units kind of shocks me. We both met with Jeremy early on when they were proposing the higher buildings, and they were set quite a bit off of our properties that sit right along the fence here. And now it appears, and I might be jumping to conclusions, that the setback being, I think you said 150 feet or 100 feet, it looks like those buildings will be pretty much right on top of our property. And so I would just say that concerns me, as I guess it has changed 5 times since I've seen it. And it looked like there was an accommodation for the people that do live here along Deaver Drive, that there would have been some distance from the buildings, not some distance from some of the other things on the property, but from the buildings. And so I have a little concern over that. I also don't believe that 21 kids and 133, I mean, I just don't believe that. I mean, there'll be 100, what was it,
130 units.
130 units, there'll be a lot of kids.
And especially if they're going to be, you know, 3 or 4 bedrooms, and then, like you said, at that higher end cost, these are homes that people are going to come into and they're going to live in. So
I you know, I don't have much more to say, but as a homeowner that has lived here since 1982, you know, I'd want something else, you know, coming into this property if it has to be. My preference would be to keep it as a green space, but I guess that's not going to work.
yeah, the green space would be ideal since it already has a baseball field, a soccer field, a track. It has everything there that's there already. So we can't understand why it has to be developed. That's our biggest concern.
You know, and I'd like to make one more remark about, you know, it's wanted by a lot of people when, you know, it hasn't been, you know, the people that own it now bought it some time ago. And back in the Unisys days when they sold off the property, and it's exchanged, I think it's exchanged hand a couple of times. I've dealt with them. They've been very nice to me from the standpoint of being neighborly. And so, you know, I think it's a place for the right kind of stuff. I like the idea of the single homes, but you know, and I have also a question about, will the fencing still be up? I guess that is yet to be talked about, that is around the property, and will there be a berm or something that will be between the two houses? Maybe that's another subject, but those are the kind of things we homeowners think about right off the bat. I hope you can understand that.
Thank you,
It's an impact, you know, it's at least an impact to the fact that we have to deal with change. And I'd also like to know if it's your idea that we're going to merge the two communities, the one that's here with that. What I mean by merge is it's going to be all open and combined as you know, as all these properties together with the same access roads and that sort of thing.
So, Mr. John, thank you for your comments. And, you know, I'm taking notes because this is the kind of information that we're here for. And if we are able to move forward with the land development process, those conversations will continue with you, you know, relative to a berm and landscaping and access. And we haven't designed this to have an interconnection with your community. That's not, but, you know, we're at the infancy stage of, as I said before, and we'd like to keep the conversation going.
And you also have to understand there's an awful lot of wildlife in our area that live back there. I mean, we have red foxes in our yard almost every day. We have deer running through our yard almost every day. I have caught in our humane traps, I've caught skunks and raccoons. I caught 2 baby raccoons last year. So you have to take that into consideration. Like, and I just took a picture of a great horned owl in those trees 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago. So just want to let you, the township people know that we do have other residents here besides people. So.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I make a suggestion that Ms. John upload that picture or send it to us? I'd love to see that owl. Maybe
you want to see the owl?
I'd be delighted, and maybe we can share it through our social media. I think it would be a wonderful thing.
All right, who do I send it to?
You can send it to supervisors or board at whitpaintownship.org.
All right, I have to write it down and then I can send it to you.
See, you're getting a picture of an owl out of this.
I didn't mean to create any problems, but I thought it'd be a really nice idea.
We are birders, and
yeah.
we love the birds.
So it's Whitpain.
It's board, capital B, like Board of Supervisors, board at whitpaintownship.org.
At whitpaintownship.org. Okay, so just board at whitpaintownship.org.
That's correct. We'll receive it there.
Okay. All right.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Michelle,
thank you.
I'm sorry, before you go, I believe the correct email address is supervisors.
Supervisor. My mistake.
That's the one that should be used. Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. I just wanted to, the board is actually an internal email address, so that it may not go through if somebody from the outside of our organization tries to use that.
Okay, so tell me what to do
now.
So, Miss John.
It's supervisors. Miss John, yes. The email address would be supervisors, SUPERVISORS, plural.
Okay.
Supervisors at whitpaintownship.org.
Okay.
So you can actually disregard the first email address. Again, that's internal. It will not work.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm glad to hear that we have stringent controls in place. Thank you, Nicole. Do we have anybody else that would like to make a comment or ask questions?
Sorry to interrupt. We do, Ms. Chair. We have 2 other members of the audience that would like to speak at this point. Actually, I believe it's one. Dave Dahl, you're up next. You can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, Nicole. Everyone hear me?
We hear you.
Wonderful.
We can.
All right, so just a couple quick thoughts around this plan. First of all, I'm not opposed to the transitional use that they're aiming at all. I think it's an interesting idea. You know, I think there've been a couple comments around there about warehousing on the line, and as my understanding of the RE, as reading through the ordinance, I don't believe warehousing is a supported use on there, except as a incidental or ancillary use in support of the other business, which would be other engineering and office use. So I don't think warehousing itself is a use of that property. As far as the density goes, we've talked a little bit about that, and they're focused on R3, which is the sort of higher end of that. I think most of the recent zoning uses that have been proposed, such as the park and rec changes and all that went through, have all focused on R3B, which is similar, but a much just lower density. So I think, Kristen and friends, if you could look at the R3B planning around that, I think that might be a little more successful option. That also ties into some of the density of the acreage, whereas I think it was Mrs. Mudambi mentioned around green space, right? The plan you've thrown out kind of uses the maximum use of that, so whereas it doesn't really provide any sort of green space, which would be very attractive and provide some space for not just for the residents, but the community that uses that property already. That's been alluded to a few times. So, and then as far as between the properties, that would also allow some berms, buffers, and things like that. That I think would also be a better, more creative use of some of the space around the edges of the property. And then just again, sort of the concern for that the backside road off of Penn Lane, having lived here for a long time and seeing that the density of traffic that comes out of there, I think that's a concern given the numbers we're talking about. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a look, Mr. Dahl. Thank you.
It should be noted just as a reminder to everybody, I know, Kristen, you've mentioned this as well. This is just preliminary. So I'm anxious to hear everyone's comments. For anybody that's already spoken, just in deference to the time constraints, I'd like that, whomever else is out there that might have a question or a comment, to let them proceed first. Just remember, this isn't anything there's no plan yet. There's nothing that's been put forth. There's nothing presented. So it's just very preliminary. With that, Nicole, do we have anybody else that's yet to speak that would like to say anything or ask the question?
Yes, Mrs. Minnick, we do have one more hand raised in the audience. Bridget Robinson, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
The name is Sheila Kirsten. I'm obviously dialing in on my daughter's Zoom. I live in the neighborhood that essentially extends from Maple Acre Drive. If you were looking at a map, I believe it's called Canterbury Park, but think of it as being flanked by Union Meeting Road and Penland Bluebell Pike as you approach the intersection with Skippack. So it's a large residential area, and I wanted to point out that traffic obviously is a lot more than just the access road out of the back of this property. It would affect everything up to Union Meeting Road, around the block, if you will, around Skippack and back down Penland Bluebell Pike. That's the pattern of traffic right now, even coming out of the business activity, as well as those of us who use that road to go down the hill to the post office and things on Township Line. So a huge concern, obviously, about the traffic. This is the first time I'm actually hearing of this high density residential proposal. So thank you for the informational session, but quite shocked, quite frankly, to hear that something this dense could be considered back there. I don't expect it to remain green space, but my two questions are, I would like to know what is the concerted effort that's truly being done to put something else in there that qualifies under R&E. I admire in recent years the work that's been done at the corporate end of the park, and technically it's all corporate park. Very beautiful buildings have been put in there, some sculptures, some nice walkways. We utilize it from our neighborhood to cycle and walk in. So I'd really like to know what is being done in parallel to maintain that as R&E, and what clients you're looking at to develop a new building in that corner. And lastly, I have a question around, I'm not sure who can answer this best, maybe Roman might remember this, the farmhouse property at the end of the access road. I recall when the hospital was being considered back in there, there was talk that a property, I believe, is somehow owned by the same corporate owner and may be developed into an official intersection to help with easement out of that back road. So if someone could answer that question, that's my two questions. Thank you.
Sure, I can tackle that. So actually the owners, 3 owners ago, did purchase the property at the corner of Penland Bluebell Pike and Stenton. They, at the time, bought it in case there would be a project to improve the intersection of Stenton and Penland Bluebell Pike, which is an intersection that the township has always been concerned. And then with some of the previous development proposals, there was talk of potentially closing the connection to Penland Bluebell Pike. And then none of those plans moved forward. And it is my understanding that the property at the corner of the residence has been sold. It's no longer owned by any of the corporate entities.
Roman, let me, if I can, expand on a little bit of what you said. I guess for my sins, I've been on the Unisys Arborcrest committee now for over 11 years. And I appreciate your comments about how you are happy or satisfied with the way it's been developed. That did not happen without a lot of hard negotiating with the owners of the majority of that property. The challenge with this parcel D is it is owned by a separate owner. And as much as over the years, on countless meetings, we had encouraged both owners to work together for a unified plan. That just didn't happen. And now we're left with parcel D after many different concepts that came forward, some of which we went out to promote and bring in others, other developers and organizations that were somewhat interested or had low density, low traffic requirements there, and it didn't happen. So this is where we're at, and I was going to save this comment to the end, but it's apropos here. I appreciate the Ironwood team's persistence in coming back to us. When you first came to us with this idea, I think Mr. Kennedy was charitable in our response. We said we were not interested at all. In fact, we gave you a pretty hard no. But you wouldn't take no for an answer, and you came back, and your plan has evolved over time. So I appreciate your willingness to work with the township and come up with a different concepts that might be more appropriate for this site. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and I've said this many times over the years, township staff, the planning commission, the planning committee receives many concepts every month. Only very few make it through the process to get to a public meeting like we have here this evening. But as the equitable owner of the property, the Ironwood Group here has a right as a property owner to bring forward a plan that they think is economical and will bring value to not only to themselves and future owners, but to the township as well. So that's where we're at this stage of the conversation. If there are other comments, you're welcome to have them now or after the meeting, and we'll take them in line at the Giant or by email or church or wherever. But as is normal, Whitpain residents are always well informed and have lots of good comments as they exhibited here tonight. And as we go forward, maybe this concept flies, maybe it doesn't, but I think it was a good discussion this evening. I did want to correct a couple times the Bluebell Ave development was characterized as a multifamily apartments. That's really not true. Those units are extended stay executive units that are really marketed and intended for business executives, as somebody mentioned, who are in town for a week and leave on weekends, which is a good chunk of the population that's there now, or families in transition that need a place to stay for 6 months or a year. So it's not really multifamily home or apartments. And that's reflected in the rates that they get for those units, as well as the zoning conditions. So it's not really apartments. That's not to say that at some point, somewhere down the road, that couldn't change. But I just did want to make that clarification. With that, I'll stop, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. If there are no other comments from the public, then I would suggest that we carry on with the next item on our agenda, but I certainly don't want to cut anybody off. I want to allow ample opportunity. So one last ask from Nicole, if there's anybody else out there that has yet to speak that would be interested in doing so.
Ms. Chair, there are no more hands raised in the audience.
Okay, well, with that, I'd like to thank the representatives from, excuse me, from Ironwood this evening for your time. Thank you for joining us. It's always constructive to hear the residents when you're planning to develop something going down the road. So appreciate your time. So thank you all for joining us this evening. And we'll certainly be back in touch. We'll hear from one another again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. And I've taken copious notes. We'll continue to incorporate these comments into our design ideas. And we just appreciate having the opportunity to hear from our neighbors and hear from the public and from you folks. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.